Her name is Tamar, and her story is one of unimaginable loss, betrayal, and silence. She was the daughter of a king, yet she found herself stripped of her dignity and left to mourn in isolation. She pleaded for justice, begged for mercy, but the very hands that should have embraced her turned away. What happens when the voices of the vulnerable are silenced, when the cries of the broken are ignored? Today, we journey through the depths of Tamar's pain, seeking to understand not just the tragedy, but the resilience that still echoes in her spirit. This is the story of Tamar, the daughter of King David, a story that starts with trust and ends with overwhelming loss. Imagine being a woman, your body violated, your dignity shattered, and your cries for help falling on deaf ears. Tamar's life was forever changed by a single act of violence, yet her story is often overlooked. How do you survive such a betrayal when those who should stand with you remain silent? In today's episode, we are going to explore Tamar's painful journey and the lessons her story holds for us all. And don't miss how her experience connects to Dinah, another woman whose story reminds us of the need for justice and compassion. Dear friends, we have one request. If you enjoy this video and it touches your heart, please write Amen in the comment box below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support encourages us to keep sharing these powerful stories. Let's fill the comments with amens and spread the love. To understand Tamar's story, we first need to examine the backdrop of King David's household. On the surface, David is a powerful king, a man chosen by God and revered as a man after God's own heart. But behind the palace walls, his family is far from peaceful. David's polygamy, having many wives and concubines, leads to a complicated family dynamic. With numerous children born to different mothers, sibling rivalries, and divided loyalties, his household becomes a hotbed of tension and conflict. Adding to this, David's past sins, particularly his affair with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband Uriah, cast a long shadow over his reign. In a moment of weakness, David sees Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah, and takes her into his home, leading to a pregnancy. To cover up his sin, he arranges for Uriah to be placed on the front lines of battle, where he is killed. This act of adultery and murder not only violates God's commandments, but also begins to unravel David's family and kingdom. Though David repents and seeks forgiveness, the consequences of these sins ripple through his family. Nathan the prophet's chilling words after David's sin still echo, "The sword will never depart from your house." David's failure as a father to address these brewing tensions only makes matters worse. He is often passive, neglecting to discipline his children or intervene in their disputes. His inaction allows small problems to grow into major crises, turning his household into a ticking time bomb. It is within this volatile environment that Tamar's tragic story unfolds. Tamar, one of King David's daughters, is born to him by Maacah, a princess from the kingdom of Geshur. She is described as beautiful, graceful, and virtuous, a princess whose presence commands respect. Tamar grows up alongside her full brother, Absalom, who is fiercely protective of her. Life for Tamar seems promising. She is part of the royal family, surrounded by wealth, influence, and privilege. But in David's fractured household, even the most promising lives can be marked by tragedy. Tamar becomes the innocent victim of the toxic environment her father has failed to address. And so, the stage is set for one of the most heartbreaking stories in the Bible, an account of obsession, betrayal, and the devastating consequences of unchecked sin. In the royal palace, Tamar's half-brother Amnon begins to harbor a dangerous obsession with her. As the firstborn son of King David, Amnon holds a position of privilege and power, yet his thoughts are consumed by Tamar's beauty and grace. The Bible describes his feelings vividly. Amnon is so distressed over his sister Tamar that he became sick, 2 Samuel 13 verse 2. However, this is not a love rooted in care, respect, or admiration. Instead, it is an unhealthy and consuming obsession. His emotions are entirely self-centered, focused on fulfilling his lustful cravings at any cost, without regard for Tamar's dignity, her honor, or the devastating impact his actions might have on her and their family. Amnon's infatuation blinds him to reason and morality. As he broods over his desires, he becomes increasingly restless and tormented. The societal boundaries and moral laws of Israel, which explicitly prohibit such relationships, only add to his frustration. Instead of seeking wisdom or turning to godly counsel to deal with his troubling feelings, Amnon confides in Jonadab, his cousin. Jonadab is the son of David's brother Shimea, making him part of the royal family. He is described as a shrewd and cunning man, someone known for his ability to manipulate situations for his own advantage. Rather than offering Amnon guidance to resist his immoral desires, Jonadab becomes a willing accomplice in Amnon's scheme, using his craftiness to facilitate wrongdoing. Jonadab devises a sinister plan. His plan is calculated and manipulative, playing on the trust and familial care expected within David's household. He advises Amnon to feign illness and appear too weak to get out of bed, creating a scenario where he would seem helpless and in need of personal attention. As part of the act, Amnon is to specifically request that Tamar, his sister, come to his chambers to prepare food for him and serve it with her own hands. This request, Jonadab reasons, would not raise suspicion. After all, Tamar is a dutiful sister, and caring for a sick sibling would be seen as an act of kindness and responsibility. By isolating Tamar in Amnon's private quarters under the guise of compassion, Jonadab creates the perfect opportunity for Amnon to act on his vile intentions without interference. Blinded by his desires and encouraged by Jonadab's manipulative plan, Amnon agrees, setting the stage for one of the most heartbreaking betrayals in the Bible. A plan that will not only devastate Tamar, but also ignite a chain of tragic events within David's household. Amnon follows Jonadab's cunning plan with precision. He lays down in his quarters, feigning illness, and waits for his father, King David, to check on him. When David visits to inquire about his condition, Amnon seizes the moment to make his calculated request. He says, "I would like my sister Tamar to come and make some special bread in my sight, so I may eat from her hand." 2 Samuel 13, verse 6. The request, seemingly innocent, appeals to David's concern for his son's well-being. David, unaware of Amnon's intentions, sends word to Tamar to fulfill the request as stated in 2 Samuel 13, verse 7. David sent word to Tamar at the palace, "Go to the house of your brother Amnon and prepare some food for him." Tamar, ever dutiful and compassionate, goes to Amnon's house and begins to prepare the food. She kneads the dough, bakes the bread, and serves it to him as requested. However, when she offers the food, Amnon refuses to eat and dismisses everyone present, leaving the two of them alone. Amnon then insists, "Bring the food here into my bedroom so I may eat from your hand." 2 Samuel 13, verse 10. Oblivious to his sinister intentions, Tamar complies, bringing the bread to him in his private chamber. But at that moment, Amnon grabs her and reveals his true intentions, saying, "Come to bed with me, my sister." 2 Samuel 13, verse 11. This shocking act of betrayal and violation is the culmination of Amnon's selfish lust and Jonadab's manipulative plan, marking the beginning of Tamar's tragic ordeal. When Amnon reveals his vile intentions, Tamar is shocked and horrified. Summoning all her courage, she pleads with him, "No, my brother, don't force me. Such a thing should not be done in Israel. Don't do this wicked thing." Tamar appeals to both morality and the law, emphasizing that such an act is abhorrent and a grave sin against God and their people. She tries to reason with Amnon, urging him to consider the consequences of his actions and the shame it will bring not only to her but to himself as well. In desperation, she even offers an alternative, saying, "Please speak to the king. He will not keep me from being married to you. 2 Samuel 13 verse 13. Though it is unlikely that such a marriage would have been approved, Tamar's offer is a desperate attempt to buy time and prevent the unthinkable. But Amnon, consumed by his lust and blinded to reason, ignores her pleas. He forces himself on her, committing a heinous act that forever scars Tamar, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. After the act, a startling shift occurs. The obsession that once consumed Amnon turns into intense hatred. The Bible says, "Then Amnon hated her with intense hatred." In fact, he hated her more than he had loved her. Amnon said to her, "Get up and get out." 2 Samuel 13, verse 15. His so-called love is revealed as nothing more than lust, and now, filled with guilt and contempt for what he has done, he projects his self-loathing onto Tamar. In a cruel twist, he orders her to leave his presence. Tamar, refusing to let him dismiss her so callously, protests, "Sending me away would be a greater wrong than what you have already done to me." 2 Samuel 13, verse 16. Her plea highlights the cultural stigma she now faces. Being cast out after such an act would mark her as defiled and ruin her future. Amnon, utterly indifferent to Tamar's suffering and pleas, takes his cruelty a step further. Not only does he dismiss her words, but he orders her to be forcefully removed from his chambers. In an act of callous rejection, he has the door locked behind her, as if to erase the evidence of his crime and silence her anguish. This heartless action not only compounds Tamar's physical and emotional pain, but also ensures her complete humiliation, isolating her in her moment of deepest vulnerability. Devastated, Tamar is left to face the aftermath alone. She tears her ornate robe, the garment of a royal virgin, a symbol of her dignity and purity. This act is a public expression of her grief and despair, signifying the irreversible loss of her honor. Pouring ashes on her head, she cries aloud in mourning, embodying the depth of her sorrow and the injustice she has endured. The once proud daughter of the king is now desolate, stripped of her dignity, and burdened with a shame that was not her own, while Amnon's betrayal leaves scars that ripple far beyond this tragic moment. When Tamar's brother Absalom learns of the heinous act committed against her, his heart burns with righteous anger. Tamar finds refuge in Absalom's house, where he provides her with shelter and protection. However, his immediate response is to tell her, "Be quiet for now, my sister. He is your brother. Don't take this thing to heart." 2 Samuel, verse 20. While Absalom's intentions may be to offer her some semblance of comfort and encourage her to avoid public disgrace, his words fail to address the depth of Tamar's suffering. The pain and trauma Tamar endures are far too profound for such placation, and her wounds remain raw, both emotionally and spiritually. Meanwhile, King David hears about the incident and becomes furious. However, despite his anger, David does nothing to bring justice for Tamar. Whether out of weakness, favoritism toward Amnon as his firstborn, or guilt from his own moral failings, David's inaction speaks volumes. As both a father and a king, David is responsible for upholding justice and protecting his children, yet he fails on both counts. David's failure to act ultimately sets the stage for even greater turmoil in his family. Absalom, while outwardly offering his sister Tamar refuge, does not forget the injustice done to her. For 2 years he harbors a deep, simmering anger and a thirst for vengeance against Amnon. His grief over his sister's suffering turns to a burning desire for retribution, and he plans to take matters into his own hands. Absalom knows that the system of justice in his family has failed Tamar, and he decides that only a personal act of vengeance will restore her honor in his eyes. He invites all the royal sons to a grand feast, held at his own estate, under the guise of a celebration. Among those invited is Amnon, the very man who has caused Tamar's irreversible suffering. Absalom knows the moment is ripe to exact justice on behalf of his sister. As the feast progresses and the brothers drink freely, Absalom's heart is set on one thing: vengeance. When the moment comes, he gives a chilling order to his servants: "Watch when Amnon's heart is merry with wine, and when I say to you, strike Amnon down, then kill him." 2 Samuel 13, verse 28. The servants carry out Absalom's grim command without hesitation. Amnon, caught in his drunken stupor, is struck down in cold blood by the servants of Absalom, his life extinguished by the very hands of those who had once served his family. While Absalom's action may seem like an act of justice to him, it is also a stark reflection of Tamar's ongoing tragedy. Tamar's suffering has been met with silence, neglect, and the brokenness of a royal family too entangled in its own dysfunction to protect her. Her honor, though violated, was never truly avenged through lawful means. Absalom's revenge serves as a grim reminder that the pain she experienced did not end with Amnon's death. It only deepens the rift in their family and spirals them further into cycles of violence and mistrust. The murder of Amnon does not bring Tamar peace or closure. In fact, it opens a new chapter of grief, as the entire kingdom is now plunged into further turmoil. The justice she never received is now replaced by bloodshed, and her story becomes yet another chapter in the fall of her father's house, marking a long-lasting scar on the royal family. Absalom, fearing retribution for his crime, flees Jerusalem, escaping to the kingdom of Geshur, where he remains in exile for 3 years. His actions, however, sow the seeds for greater unrest. What begins as a private act of revenge against Amnon soon grows into a larger rebellion against David himself. Absalom's bitterness toward his father, compounded by his failure to seek justice for Tamar, leads him to challenge David's authority, eventually marching to take the throne in a bloody civil war. As for Tamar, she fades from the narrative. After her assault, Tamar is never truly restored to her former place in the royal family. She is left to live in seclusion, mourning her lost innocence, and the kingdom does not offer her the healing she deserves. While Absalom's rebellion and the turmoil within David's house dominate the rest of the story, Tamar's pain and suffering remain an unspoken undercurrent, lingering in the shadows of the royal family's downfall. Tamar's tragedy is not just in the violation she endured, but in the silence that followed. Her life, once full of promise and hope, now marked by loss, abandonment, and an unresolved grief that would haunt her forever. Furthermore, Tamar's story is a powerful reminder of the far-reaching consequences of sin. Amnon's unchecked lust, Jonadab's deceit, and David's failure to act all contribute to the devastation of lives and the destruction of family bonds. Their actions illustrate how sin, when left unchecked, spirals out of control, leading to irreversible harm. David's inaction particularly highlights the need for justice, as his failure to address Amnon's crime allows the cycle of sin and vengeance to grow, eventually tearing his family and kingdom apart. This story serves as a stark warning about the importance of standing up for what is right and taking action to protect the vulnerable from harm. Tamar's name, which means palm tree, represents strength, grace, and resilience. Just like a palm tree stands tall and survives in harsh conditions, Tamar shows courage and dignity even after facing betrayal and injustice. Her words to Amnon reveal her wisdom and self-respect, even in a terrible situation. Though her purity and future are taken from her, her name reminds us of her value and inner strength, showing that her story is one of survival and a cry for justice. The symbolic acts of mourning she performs, the tearing of her robe, the cries she uttered, serve as a powerful testimony to the strength of survivors, even in the face of overwhelming injustice. While her story ends in silence, it echoes the cry for justice for all who have suffered abuse, urging us to protect the vulnerable and hold the guilty accountable. Another powerful biblical example of a woman who endured great suffering, similar to Tamar, is Dinah, the daughter of Jacob and Leah. Her story, though not as widely discussed, is one of profound tragedy and injustice. In Genesis 34, Dinah is raped by Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, in the city of Shechem. Much like Tamar, Dinah's violation is met with silence and inaction from her father, Jacob. While Shechem expresses a desire to marry Dinah afterward, his actions do not erase the harm he has caused. Dinah, like Tamar, is left with the trauma of her assault. Later, Dinah's brothers, Simeon and Levi, in their anger, take matters into their own hands and seek revenge by killing Shechem and his men, escalating the cycle of violence and vengeance. While Dinah's story doesn't end with her being completely silenced, the lack of direct biblical commentary on her emotional healing and the absence of justice in her case make her story similar to Tamar's. Both stories highlight the consequences of sin, the failure of justice, and the deep emotional and social scars left on the victims. If you're curious to learn more about Dinah and how her story mirrors Tamar's, please check out our previous video. And that's it for today's video. If you found this video insightful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into biblical stories. Have you ever felt like there's so much more to the stories you thought you knew? On our channel, we discuss the untold layers and hidden meanings behind some of the most captivating narratives in the Bible. Each episode invites you to explore the deeper emotions, conflicts, and mysteries that shaped the lives of people in ancient times. From family rivalries to miraculous moments, we explore the stories behind the scenes, giving you a fresh perspective on these ancient texts. Our episodes are designed to spark your curiosity and make you think about the deeper meanings behind these timeless tales. So, if you're ready to see the Bible in a whole new light, come and explore with us. You won't want to miss a single episode. And as always, feel free to drop your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, keep questioning and keep exploring.